mansion near Aberystwyth, which is now, as you can see, a fine country house hotel. And welcome to the first in a series of 7 twilight sessions about life in what was known as the wild west of Wales. So why real Halloween as the first theme this early in October? Well, the ancient folk practices of a werin bobol and the yearly calendar of folk ritual and magic are essential to the plot, the atmosphere and relationships in both my Nanteos novels. If I want to start my readings at the beginning, I must take you first to that strange world, lived in the open air for much of the year, but lit by reeds set in tallow and a meagre peat fire during the long, damp winters. Nos Galan Gaea, or All Hallows Eve, is just a game to many of us now. Yet, in the 1750s, both the Christian significance and the more ancient pagan festival was so real for so many. On All Hallows Eve, not only did the people visit the graves of their ancestors to clean and dress the monuments with flowers, but it was also one of many powerful ysbryd nos, or spirit nights, in which divination could be practiced, ritual purification and offerings accepted by the fates, and the gap between the corporal and the spirit world merged. It may seem odd that people who had a genuine belief in Christianity at the time would also take part in the traditional customs from a more pagan era. Yet, even in my extended family in living memory, regular chapel goers, even deacons, have sought help from a dyn hysbys to lift bad fortune from the family. Rhywun wedi ei reibio fi, someone's put a curse on me, is a phrase I've actually heard spoken. Back in the 18th century, it seems that, though the increasingly powerful nonconformists were trying to stamp out these ancient folk practices, the established church appeared to have more of a patronising, if exasperated, tolerance. So we're in the Nightingale suite, which is the honeymoon suite in the hotel that is now what Nanteos has become. And I visited this beautiful house as a child and was haunted by stories of the Powell family who lived here between 1730 and 1950. I was haunted by tales of a laddie wen, the grey lady of Nanteos, who is said to roam the house, especially here in this very room and on the long first floor landing and the grand stairs. Elizabeth Powell, born Elizabeth Owen, the Grey Lady of Nanteos, died young in tragic circumstances and is said to be searching in vain for her lost jewels. She is the main character in the first of the Nanteos novels, The Shadow of Nanteos, which was published in 2015 and launched just next door through the wall there in the Grade 1 Rococo music room. Nanteos is internationally renowned for the Nanteos Cup, used by many to heal and thought by some to be the Holy Grail. Having recently been stolen, it's now lodged securely in Aberystwyth at the National Library of Wales, where it can be viewed by the public under glass. Other legends, stories and testimonies swirl in and around this atmospheric house. The wheels of a carriage driven by a headless coachman can be heard on the gravel. A strange harp sounds from the woods. But you don't have to go far to come across practices that are far from imaginary. In fact, when my daughter and I stayed here one Halloween many years ago, a walk in the clear October air took us off the Nanteos estate and onto the remains of an Iron Age hill fort in the woods, where people had left animal skulls, feathers and totems between the branches of the stunted oaks that formed a near-perfect circle at the summit. So, what may the people have done at All Hallows Eve in 1750? Well, there was a huge class disconnect. The wealthy, like the powerful family who owned Nanteos, would have most likely only taken part in the Christian elements of the festivities. Largely illiterate, mostly monoglot Welsh people, or Werin-bobl, as we called ourselves, were more likely to have been present at the great bonfires on the mountains. Contemporary accounts and the research recorded later in the century by amateur historians describe many rituals, the details of which varied greatly from place to place, but which had in common a desire to divine the future, in particular who would live, who would die in the coming year, and who would be your future lover or spouse. 9 seems to be a hugely significant number. You would eat the stump now rhyw. 9 parts mash with potatoes, carrots, peas, turnips, parsnips, leeks, pepper and salt. A ring was hidden in the mixture and all partook. If you found the ring, you would be the first to be married in the new year. And only the Welsh could celebrate such a solemn ritual with root vegetables. You would walk 9 times around the fire. And I want to read you an extract from a wonderful book, classic book, Welsh Folk Customs, by Trevor M. Owen, in which he describes 2 other rituals involving the number 9. Okay, so Myrick here in 1810 is giving testimony. A person leaves the house and walks around it 9 times. Holding a glove in his hand, he asks, Dyma'r faneg, ond ble ma'r llaw? Here's the glove, where is the hand? He then meets the spirit of his sweetheart, who stretches forth her hand to obey his call. The face he sees will certainly be the face of his future wife. In central Cardiganshire, where we are now, one walked 9 times around a dung heap, singing, Dyma'r esgid, ond ble ma'r draed? Here's the shoe, drawed, here's the shoe, but where's the foot? And I love that. The Welsh are such an earthy lot, particularly back in those days. I love the fact that they're including even the dung heap in their festivities there. But it wasn't just divining the future. Some of the rituals could even influence and change the future, as we'll see later in an extract from the Shadow of Nanteos. Some elements of the Spirit Night festivities would be familiar to us now. The apple bobbing and the roasting of apples and nuts, going from house to house with lanterns to bake food and drink. However, in the 18th century, it was likely cross-dressing adult men and women who would call at your homestead or cottage to wassail on Spirit Nights, and they were often called gwrachod, witches. How very different from our modern version, where junior school children, accompanied by their parents and carrying plastic shop-bought props, beg for sweets. We still know the frisson of walking out into the night, but then the nights were so much darker, the population so much sparser, and the stakes, in a rural economy, always only one harvest, one milking cow, one saleable rent pig, away from starvation. Back then, the rituals practiced in the year to ensure a good harvest and good health were no gain. Spirits of the dead would walk abroad to sit on every stile at midnight and gather at the crossroads. Sometimes it was the laddie wen you would see, or even the hwch the guta, the huge, tailless black sow who roamed the countryside at Calan Gaea. So the Nanteos novels are shot through with divination and traditional folk practices. And I'm going to read you an extract which is set on Norse Calan Gaea. Mary, a nursemaid at this mansion, under the tutelage of the cook, who's called Martha, practices the ritual designed to make the man she set her heart on fall in love with her. So this is the first of the Nanteos books, the Shadow of Nanteos. And we're going to read an extract now that's actually set on Norse Galangeia, page 213. Later the house is quiet as Martha had predicted, All Hallows Eve having pulled everyone away. Only Jenkins has stayed, reading his Bible in his quarters above the stable as a shield against the dark old ways. And of course Jenkins is an early nonconformist. I'll see to the mistress when she comes back, but the maid's trick should really be done after the household has retired to bed, you know. Yes, answers Mary, you said. You must accept it as it is. Have you the spring water? Yes, I put it behind the door so no one would take it. Fetch it. Martha begins to lay the long table, placing out food. Mary returns with a full pail, putting it in front of the flames to warm. But what if some of the others come back before midnight and eat of it? I won't see him. He's the only one likely to come back before midnight. He and the mistress, that is. The others won't be back till light, until every spirit is chased away by drink and mischief. Mary nods gravely. Martha goes to the great range to prepare the toasted cheese as Mary takes off her clothes. She stands in her thin white shift. You look like a spectre yourself, Martha laughs as she brings the meat plate loaded with food. There, you must place it. Mary puts it into the centre of the table, fussing, moving it a hair's breadth one way, a sliver the other. No need to fuss, girl, just put it there. He'll find it. Now take that thing off and wash it full in the special water. She turns away to make up the fire. Mary hesitates for a moment, glancing towards the door, but there is no sound, and the dogs would have alerted her if anyone was abroad. She slips the material off her shoulder, but makes no move as it pulls around her bare ankles. Martha turns round. Come on, girl, what are you afraid of? Mary shakes her head. Mary? The young woman is hiding her face. The candle flames, disturbed by the hungry draw from the banked-up fire, lunge to the side, making darker all her pits and hollows. Martha looks her up and down. You've not been eating enough. You must get yourself downstairs and eat with us more. I usually eat with the children. Well, you're missing out somewhere. That's the problem with the nursery maid. You don't fit in anywhere. Mary shivers, bringing her hands across the concave sweep of her belly. Yes, I believe it now, Martha says quietly. You are a maid. Mary's eyes are wide with the boldness of it, but she doesn't dare complain. Right, says Martha, I'll leave you now. You remember what you have to do? The girl nods. The cook makes to go, then turns and retraces her steps. Mary still hasn't moved, but her head is lowered again, strands of hair hiding her face. Gently, Martha moves the wet hair aside and tucks it behind her ears. Brushing her lips lightly against the girl's tear-stained cheek, she says softly, Even if he does love somebody else, you may still turn him. Then she leaves, closing the kitchen door softly behind her. A log spits and Mary snaps out of her stupor, stepping away from her clothes, gathering up the white material and taking it to the bucket. She crouches on her haunches as she rinses it again and again, mouthing the special rhyme. For the first time that evening, a smile lifts her mouth as she gathers her loose hair back to stop it dragging in the water. She squeezes out the material and lays it on the back of the chair he most uses, unable to drag her eyes from her own body as she moves about the dimly lit room. It is not often that she sees herself naked. Hopefully, soon another will see her too. She is reluctant to leave the room, all set for his return. She scans the table once more, committing it to memory, so she may see it again as she lies in bed, waiting for his spectre to come to her. So was she successful? Well, no spoilers here tonight. Okay, so where am I now? Okay, I love that all this Hallows Eve practice is both eerily powerful but also comic. Again, trust the Welsh to think of toasted cheese as an aphrodisiac. Guilt and grief are treated by visit to the conjure, the conjurer in the novel, a figure still at work in mid-Wales in living memory. The miners in the silver and lead mines of the Cambrian Mountains were, as many miners are now of course, extremely superstitious. They believed quite literally in the tiny miners, the cnochwyr, who could be heard with their spades and picks as they worked their own tunnels underground. But these were no wicked spirits. There are many accounts of them warning of impending danger from flood or roof fall, and even such learned figures as the polymath Lewis Morris seem to have believed in them. Here, I've drawn a little from my own experience at the hill fort at Halloween to describe two of the characters from The Shadow of Nanteos, Elizabeth and Kai, visiting the miners' shrine. Okay, again, this extract is from the first book, Shadow of Nanteos, page 49. It's a bit like being in chapel, isn't it? Page numbers, etc., etc. Right, okay, so here they are. Elizabeth picks her way across a sheet of rock at the entrance to the pool. Above is a narrow cave, its entrance dressed with a different sort of moss, elongated, dripping like matted hair. As she gets nearer, she sees that there are wild, late flowers and clumps of berries slotted into every vertical nook and cranny. Facing outwards, just within the cave's darkness and not visible from a distance, is the complete skull of a goat. Not a domestic goat. The horns, beveled like a unicorn's, show it to be a wild goat skull. Leading away on both sides, making the shape of an arrowhead with a goat as apex, are the skulls of other creatures, diminishing in size as they pass beyond the reach of sight back into the cave. Elizabeth backs away fast, shouting above the noise, "Lord help us, what is practised here? Let us get away from this place." Led by Elizabeth, they scramble up the path and away from the chasm. The slate shale crumbles under their feet, and the horses' hooves lurch and slide as they leave the deadly cold of the river behind them. Soon the water's tyrannical voice is replaced by the trees. The turning autumn leaves make a dry sound as they move in the slight breeze that reaches this far down, but there is real power in the sound of the wind in the canopy above. As they push up onto the open moorland, the wind tears into them. Elizabeth sits on a boulder to catch her breath. "But why?" she shouts above the wind. Kai shrugs. "No, Kai. Someone must be very desperate to go to those lengths. Or are there witches here? Who would do such a thing?" Okay, and of course, that same pool is very important to the new novel that was released on the 25th of September, Nanteos the Dipping Pool, the second Nanteos novel. From the very beginning of this new novel, The Dipping Pool, we are in the middle of the twilight world of folk practice and ritual. We're in a crowd of people, ordinary people who wear in bobble, musicians, farmers, gypsies, out on the mountain at the great bonfires. This time, however, they're at the May Spirit Night, Calan Mai. They are here to burn the herd, to drive the bullocks live between the fires, to bring good fortune to the land for the following year. In this first chapter of my new book, set in the dark, out on the mountain where they dance, drink, and try to look into the future, relationships are made which can never be undone. I'm going to leave this first talk tonight with just the first page from the new novel, The Dipping Pool. Far away to the west, the sun sets behind the bald hills below Devil's Bridge, the sky thin and purple as the skin under an old man's eye. The darkening land is pocked by lead and silver mines. Even the horizon is deformed by the lumps of waste and scarred by adits and trenches. It is Calan Mai, a spirit night, and many climb the mountain road at dusk. The foul weather of the last winter has ruined it, made great claw marks across the surface. Fast streams in flood, following wheel ruts downhill, have pulled away the stones, making the road almost impassable. No matter. The feet, nailed in leather clogs or bare and strong, pass on. There is a hum bubbling up from the people. They clump together, then group split, teasing out like carded wool, then huddle again, all the time making a determined progress upwards. Sometimes distinct voices separate out, and many are laughing. But as the front of the group turns the final corner, silence takes them. For directly ahead, and black like a crucifix against the sky, is the tree of Sean Agorv, Sean the blacksmith. Though it is now too dark to see details, the discoloured bone, his teeth, raw and intimate, the fetishes and charms of animal bone, feather, leather and glass that the people have hung around it to banish evil, the occasional glimpse of these as a torch catches them, and the screech of the slowly swinging cage, the memory of what is here, are worse. One woman crosses herself, another puts an offering on the ground at the bottom of the scaffold and backs away. But they can see the great bonfires now, just make out the crowds surrounding them. With a new energy, they turn their backs on him and make their way towards the light. Okay, so I think we're about running out of time, are we?
Yep, 20 minutes.
20 minutes, great, lovely, and thanks ever so much for joining me tonight. It's so great to have an excuse to put on lipstick, to brush my hair, to fetch out some perfume for the first time in 7 months. I've been in my farm clothes, and it's absolutely wonderful that the book is finally published. It was a very difficult journey for this book, and thank you hugely to people like Adrian Jones of Alolva, Ivion Jenkins and Alolva itself, and to Nanteos for letting me write a lot of my book downstairs at the desk when farm work was going on our little holding. So thank you very much for joining me, and please come and join me for some or all of the next 6 that we're going to be doing around this wonderful mansion over the next few weeks. So nos da, a diolch yn fawr iawn i chi gyd am ymuno â ni heno, a diolch yn fawr iawn i Jem ac i Hannah am ffilmio.